Hey, Prolific community. Welcome back to the Prolific Hub podcast, a digital archive of all things life and the pursuit of creative entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Aaliyah Cheyenne. This podcast celebrates all of the change makers, way makers, and world builders who are charting their own paths and inspiring others to do the same. We highlight creatives, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and also discuss everyday life topics. If you've already rated and written a review for the podcast, thank you. If you haven't had a chance to just yet, it's never too late. Reviews help tremendously in the podcasting world, so I appreciate you taking the time to leave one. The best way to discover new podcasts is by word of mouth, so keep sharing the Prolific Hub podcast with your tribe. Be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you'd like to show even more support, text the show, send in a voice note, or consider a monthly subscription. See the show notes below for more details. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Hey friend, welcome back to the show. I am actually dropping in with an extra episode, not necessarily a part of the schedule, but something I thought would be fun. A fun continuation for the Astrology girlies. So if you listen to the previous episode, you know that we had Tracey L Rogers on the show to talk more about her business, her work in astrology, her work as an author, her work as an activist, her work as a DEI consultant and professional, and so much more. And I thought it'd be fun to share a little bit of the reading I actually had with Tracey back in November 2023. So in November 2023, I booked 2 readings with Tracey. I booked a reading for an astrological forecast for 2024, and I also booked an attraction factor reading. So the attraction factor reading was really to share more about me in terms of what I am attracted to, but also to share more about what others may be attracted to in me or what they may gravitate towards me for. It was super informative, and I'm going to share a small clip of that. That one's a little bit more personal for me, so I'm not going to share the whole thing, but I'll share a small clip. And then I also had an annual forecast reading. So that reading was to share more about what my 2024 would look like. And I thought it would be fun to revisit the part of that reading, around this time of year and kind of give an update to share more about how things panned out. So that's what I want to do with this episode. So if you're interested in that, keep listening, stay tuned in. So I'm going to share just a small clip of my attraction factor reading with Tracey. If, after hearing this, you're convinced that you absolutely want to book a reading with Tracey, I highly recommend it. She's so good at what she does. She's so great. She's so knowledgeable. And I highly recommend it. And I will make sure that I link her website in the show notes below so you can book some time with her. So let's jump into the attraction factor reading, the segment that I like to share.
So no matter where you are on planet Earth, the sun always rises to the east first. And so that's why, astrologically speaking, your ascendant sign, which is also often referred to as the rising sign, describes the first impression that you make on other people. Okay. Now, luckily for you, or not luckily, it just so happens that your sun sign is the same as your ascending sign, right? That's not an uncommon thing. What that means is what people see in terms of who you are is not very far off from who you actually are, right? It's like what they see is what they get. It's not, like I said, uncommon to have your sun and ascendant sign in the same sign. What it does mean is that how folks perceive you is pretty straightforward. Whereas my sun sign is Leo, my ascendant sign is Virgo, 2 very different signs, which means how I present myself to the world is very different from who I actually am. You don't have that problem. Okay. And so your ascendant sign, sun sign is Aquarius. All of the signs of the zodiac belong to one of four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Aquarius is an air sign. Air signs are the thinkers of the zodiac. So these are signs that operate in the realm of ideas, okay? And I always describe Aquarius as the visionary of the zodiac. It's a sign that's futuristic. It's a sign that thinks outside of the box. It's a sign that's light years ahead of the rest of the world and tends to be highly intelligent, and operates, on a different playing field. Okay. Aquarians are quirky. They're eccentric. They're a little weird, a little awkward, right? And what I love about this sign is that it is fiercely, fiercely, fiercely individualistic. You'll often hear Aquarians described as the rebels of the zodiac, and that's because it's a sign that doesn't like to have to conform or assimilate. If you tell an Aquarius to go left, it's going to go right, and usually for shits and giggles, okay? And so it's a sign that just stands out. It's a sign that's different. And it's why Aquarians are also often referred to as the lone wolves of the zodiac. These are the outliers of the zodiac. And what's interesting about that is because Aquarians are so different, it's a sign that knows what it feels like to be dejected from society or to be ostracized from society. And because Aquarians know what it feels like not to fit in, not to have a sense of belonging, it's the most friendliest sign, the most non-discriminating sign, the most tolerant sign of the zodiac. Aquarians are easily able to make friends with folks from different walks of life. Aquarians would make friends with my laptop, okay? So it's a sign that is very welcoming and inviting to all people. And that, interestingly, is what lends itself to Aquarians' popularity. People gravitate toward Aquarians, if anything, because they're curious. Who's the person with the pink hair, right? And so this is a sign that is known to be very influential. It's a sign that has quite a bit of reach as it relates to, aligning with different causes, being philanthropic, lending its genius mind to creative ideas and inventions that are innovative. Popular Aquarians I can think of include Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey. These are people who really just kind of, again, think outside of the box. And so with your ascendant sign here, this is how folks perceive you, right? This is how people look at you. And with your sun sign here, this is who you are, okay? Starting with your ascendant sign, you may find that folks are curious to know your story. You could be the person hanging out in the background and people will still notice you. People will still gravitate toward you, okay? You may find with your ascendant here, you personally might feel often socially awkward, especially when meeting new people for the first time, romantic interests especially, because you are different. You're not going to go into a romantic situation the way most people do. And so you may find that there's a hint of uncertainty, maybe some insecurity, maybe some anxiety around, is this person going to like me for me because I show up differently, right? And that's not good or bad. It's just what it is. It's also not your problem, right? Like people should accept you for you, especially because you are so accepting of others. But still, when it comes to dating and mating, because you're 5 years ahead of the rest of the Muggle world, you're a wizard living amongst us, right? You may find that, it can be challenging sometimes to meet people that you organically click with because you're so different and so unique and not one to conform, okay? That said, you may find that there are folks who are attracted to your quirkiness, right? You may find, too, that you move through the world somewhat aloof, not really paying attention to the attention that you're getting from secret admirers, right? And so all this to say, you only need to be yourself and you'll find that the right people will gravitate toward you, okay? Same is true with your sun. You are someone that is non-conforming and you have a fierce sense of identity in who you are. And it is extremely important that folks accept you for who you are, especially because, again, you yourself are so accepting of others. Because Aquarius is an air sign and highly intelligent, you also need someone who's smart, someone that can be conversational with you, someone that can keep up with your intellect, someone with whom you can have crazy conversations with. So that mental rapport is also going to be really important with your sun here as well. Okay. Now, those things said, sometimes Aquarians can be the rebel without a cause. So you want to make sure that you're not going left for shits and giggles, right? You want to make sure there's actually a real reason why you're deciding to go left when everybody else is going right. Okay. Aquarius is also very fixed in nature. And so fixed signs tend to be pretty determined and willful, but also very stubborn. And with your ascendant here, with your sun here, you may be the most tolerant person in the world. But when it comes to your ideas, when it comes to your thoughts, when it comes to what you think things should be, it can be really hard for you to budge. Yeah. And especially if your budging requires you to kind of compromise and meet someone halfway that begs the need for conformity, you're going to really feel challenged by that. Okay. So these are things that you have to be mindful of, especially when it comes to dating and relationships. You're a unicorn, which means you're going to have a tough time finding the right person because there aren't a lot of unicorns in the world, right? And so these are things to be mindful of when you put yourself out there. The other thing that I want to point out is that you've got your sun in Aquarius, but your sun is in your 12th house. And the 12th house in astrology is the house that tells the story of our subconscious self. It represents who we are behind the scenes. You've got Mercury in your 12th house, and you also have Saturn in your 12th house. Usually when there are planets in the 12th house, it describes two things. It describes an individual who's very intuitive, very insightful, very connected to the metaphysical world. It also describes an individual that's got some serious blind spots. You don't know what you don't know. And so whenever I see planets in the 12th house, I'm quick to encourage folks to be mindful of bringing this energy to consciousness. And for you, this involves your sun, also Mercury and Saturn, which we'll get to. But your sun, literally, it's who you are, right? It's your ego self, and it's hidden in this 12th house. So you may find that, there's a tendency to hide out, especially being an Aquarius. You maybe don't want to attract the attention, okay? Or you don't want to have to explain yourself. With your sun in your 12th house, your light is kind of dimmed, naturally so, because you are self-reflective, contemplative, you're totally fine being on your own, doing your own thing. You're self-content, in other words. And so you want to make sure that you're actually allowing yourself to be seen, especially when it comes to important others. When you hide out, no one can see your light. Okay. So that's really important. The other thing too, to be mindful of is that, even though Aquarius is very social, very outgoing, very committed to different causes, you specifically are very introverted. And I mean that by definition, in that you recharge in solitude, okay? You don't mind being on your own. It makes me think of that poem by Warsan Shire where she says, "My alone time feels so good. I'll only have you if you're sweeter than my solitude," right? And so this is important for you to be mindful of because folks won't know this about you. Again, with your ascendant in Aquarius, you attract people to you, right? Folks want to know who you are. They want to tell you their life stories. They feel accepted by you. They feel warm.
So that was just a small snippet of a much longer, much larger reading. But I hope you enjoyed that and you found that interesting. And if there's anything in that that you're curious about for yourself and a full personal reading, I definitely recommend that you book some time with Tracey. With that, we're going to jump into my forecast reading. So I'm not going to share the entire part of my forecast reading. I'm just going to share the portion that kind of speaks to this part of the year that I'm currently recording this. Yeah, I want to share a little bit of an update about how things are actually going. So I'm going to play a little portion of that right now, and then we'll come back on the other side and I'll talk about how things are actually going.
So that's a reprieve that you're getting with Pluto retrograde on May 3rd. May also still sees increasing momentum in your third house. So again, new learning, training, education, all of this energy is still amplified as we move through the month of May. And then once we reach around Memorial Weekend in May, planets will start to ingress or enter your fourth house. And so remember, this is the house of home and family and domestic matters. You're going to notice a lot of activity building in this area of your chart as we close out the month of May, shifting into the month of June. And this will be important by the time we reach the month of June, because right around summer solstice in June, Jupiter will leave your third house and come into your fourth. So this is the second and final theme change that you will encounter over the course of your forecast. And remember, Jupiter expands whatever it touches. So on June 17th, right around summer solstice, Jupiter is going to leave your third house and enter your fourth, bringing a whole lot of growth and activity and expansion on the domestic front. So this is when you might want to consider some renovation projects or acquiring new property. This is when there may be additional domestic changes, someone moving in, someone moving out. This could also be interpreted as a relocation to a bigger space, to a bigger city, to a bigger environment. This could be interpreted as new additions to your house, increased family milestones, or greater demands from loved ones as well. And so remember, Jupiter's influence for the most part is a benevolent influence, but you will notice these things kind of increase and expand when Jupiter enters this area of your chart on June 17th. The rest of June, meanwhile, still sees energy activated in that second house. So money, finances, resources, all of this energy is still activated and highlighted. Once we reach summer solstice, you'll start to notice energy on the money front begin to cool. That said, you still have a lot of energy building in your third house. Jupiter is here up until around the midway point of June. Mercury is here as we enter the month of June. The sun is still here, Venus. So learning, training, short trips, all of this energy is still amplified throughout most of the month. Again, domestic matters are increasing. And then once we enter the season of summer, planets will start to enter your fifth house. And so the fifth house is the house of fun and joy and romance and creativity and recreation. And I love the timing of all of this as we move into the summer season. You may find that you're spending more time doing activities that are recreational in nature. So music concerts, festivals, getaway trips with friends, birthday celebrations, anything that taps into your inner child features. If you work with children, this could look like increased activity with kids, or if you have a lot of young people in your family, that's another interpretation. Pregnancy is also an interpretation, FYI, whether you're giving birth to brain children in the form of creative ideas or literal children. These things are highlighted as we move into the summer. If single and looking, you can meet someone new. If you're already in a relationship, this could look like increased love and affection between you and another. So I love that this stuff starts to pick up right around the beginning of summer. Fifth house activities are meant to be indulged. And so this is a beautiful energy shift that begins as we move into the beginning of summer. Now, shifting into July, the planets Saturn and Neptune will station retrograde. Saturn will technically station retrograde on June 30th. Neptune will station retrograde on July 1st. And so you're getting a reprieve from these themes that have been bursting the bubble around how you see yourself and asking you to be more disciplined with forming your true identity and focusing on your own personal path. So things are starting to wane in this area. This may see you settling into personal changes or re-strategizing your efforts. But now you're getting a reprieve from Saturn and Neptune in your first house. July also sees all of that activity on the money front waning. And so the intensified energy that was building here around mid-March will cool off as we move through the month of July. You still have a lot of activity in that third house meanwhile. So when it comes to learning, short trips, education, expansion of the mind, that energy is still very much activated. So too does activity continue to build in that fourth house of home and family and domestic matters, with Jupiter now moving through this area of your chart. Fun and recreation feature as well throughout the month of July. You'll notice that activity calms here briefly by the time we reach the midway point of July. That said, July also sees activity starting to pick up in your sixth house. And so the sixth house is the house of our schedule, our day to day, our lifestyle, our regular routines. And usually when planets enter the sixth house, it brings busy days. Your schedule is starting to fill more chores, more tasks, more responsibilities. This could be work related. This could be extracurricular in nature, time spent attending sporting events or, romantic dates. You may be scheduling doctor's appointments, annual checkups, taking on more responsibilities with family, or all of the above. Busy days are not good or bad, they're just busy. And so you do want to make sure that you're not putting too much on your plate as this energy amplifies moving through the month of July, okay? And then finally, it will be around the third week of July when planets begin to ingress or enter your seventh house. And so this is that house of relationships. And so you'll start to notice increasing activity building for you on the relationship front as we reach around the third week of July. And this is going to be important because as energy starts to build in this area of your chart, Mercury will also station retrograde in this area of your chart. And that's a retrograde that starts on August 5th. And so you may find that you're coming up against some misunderstandings with important others, miscommunications with important others. This could be interpreted as a relationship partner from your past coming back into the picture, or maybe you yourself are trying to figure out how you want to move forward in a partnership. It doesn't have to be romantic in nature. It could be a business partner or an artistic collaborator. But either way, there may be some confusion, some back and forth as it relates to the significant others in your life when Mercury stations retrograde. That starts on August 5th. Mercury will station direct on August 29th. And so same rule of thumb, no major decisions. Don't get discouraged as this energy is developing throughout the month. You won't really know where you stand or how to move forward in a relationship until we reach the month of September. So you want to be patient as relationship activity is increasing. Again, that starts around the third week of July, and then you come up against these hiccups throughout the entire month of August, okay? The rest of August, meanwhile, sees energy calming in that third house. So again, when it comes to new learning endeavors, the stimulation of your mind, Uranus is still here encouraging you to indulge curiosities, but the amplified energy that's been building in this area of your chart will start to level off as we move into the month of August. Domestic matters still feature, meanwhile. And so Jupiter is still doing its thing, and this is going to amplify too in August in an assertive way. So again, if you're flipping houses, navigating domestic changes, disputes with family and loved ones, especially as Mercury is retrograde in your seventh, this energy is still quite active as we move through the month of August. Again, you have a pause in that fifth house, so this energy has calmed starting mid-July, moving through August. Busy days are still highlighted. Meanwhile, you'll notice that this activity starts to level off temporarily as we reach the midway point of August. But the big news involves this growing momentum in that seventh house of relationships with Mercury retrograde, okay? Shifting into September, Mercury will have stationed direct. So where there were hiccups on the relationship front, these things are starting to move forward with greater momentum throughout the month of September. So if you were contemplating a big decision, or if you're experiencing misunderstandings with important others, these things are resolving as we move through the month of September.
We're back to the current episode. So as of right now, we are in Q3 of 2024, so the third quarter. We are in summertime. The heat has been heating, child. I'm unprepared for what climate change has in store for us because, yeah. So many things that are sidebar. So many things that are happening right now are giving the movie Ready Player One. They're giving the movie Elysium. They're giving the books Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. Popular or unpopular opinion, they're also giving a little bit of Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, there's just a lot going on. But I don't know why I went there. Anyway, in terms of how my Q3 is shaping up in actuality and in all reality. So I experienced some moving changes in my household earlier this year. That was a time of deep learning and deep reflection and deep processing of old emotional wounds. That time came and went, and now I'm in another season of once again experiencing some new moving changes in my household that have felt uncomfortable. They have felt triggering and upsetting. And I have been working through that in various ways. So, reconnecting and maintaining my relationship with God, with Source, with Universe, tapping into my intuition and my own energy, checking myself when I'm feeling particularly chaotic or erratic or rageful. One thing I'm doing differently than I've done in the past is instead of rushing to suppress whatever emotion or thing that I'm feeling, I am doing my best to allow myself to move through it and to feel it, which can sometimes be really scary and challenging, particularly when they're not great feelings or emotions. However, I always survive and I always come out on the other side. So, um, doable, not impossible. And I am in a place now where I am working to expand my business. My books are open again. I am seeking to take on more clients and new clients. I've updated my website. I have been doing more outreach and connection to folks I might be interested in working with or who might be interested in working with me in terms of their communication strategy for their businesses and their work, or whether it's thinking about authenticity in their business and how to show up as their most authentic selves. So I've been doing a lot of work around that in this particular season and looking ahead and planning a lot and thinking through what my next steps are and what feels the most fulfilling to me at this time, what feels the most rewarding to me at this time, what provides the best sense of security at this time. So working through all of those things, but also diving deeply into my creative projects once again. So one of those creative projects is this podcast. Another creative project in the past has been the journal that I created back in 2022. And it was a journal that I created in Canva. I self-published it through Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing program. And there are a couple of other projects that I am working on, self-publish again through KDP. So being in my creative bag and pouring into that has been really good. I'm in a season of just some old things just coming up for me that I have maybe either suppressed for a really long time or not focused on for a really long time. And through different experiences or circumstances or life events, they are bubbling back to the surface and they are calling out to me for attention and care, and healing, because we are never fully healed. The only things that change are how we respond to certain things. And I'm realizing that in certain areas, I'm still responding in an old way, and I'm not proud of that. So I would say that this quarter, I'm also doing a lot of internal work in terms of my emotions, continuing to come back home to my body, to be present with myself and my feelings and to truly feel them. even when they're not great or they're heavy, uh, or they're dark, and working through that and seeking support in whatever way that means. So recently, just emotionally and spiritually, I was feeling really, really, really chaotic in a way that I have not felt ever before. To the point where I felt flustered and like I really needed some support with that. So I sought out that support, and I've been learning more about spiritual baths and learning to just kind of cleanse that energy. It's one thing to cleanse energy in your home. It's another thing to cleanse it in your body through movement, through prayer, through ritual, and a number of other things. So I'm doing a lot of things in this season that are helping me to come home to my body. So between just business aspirations and creative projects and household changes and coming home to my body, that's kind of what's been going on with me in terms of this quarter of this year, and as it pertains to the annual forecast that I had last November 2023, for the year of 2024. On an unrelated and yet related note, the other day I was randomly thinking about the astrological sign of my creative projects, like just randomly thinking about it. And I was thinking to myself, this podcast, it's gone through evolutions. The first episode launched January 21st, 2022. But I was also thinking about my actual business, ACB Consulting and Family Services LLC. She launched on May 4th, 2022, my dad's birthday. Very interesting. Not the year, obviously, but the day. She is a Taurus baby. And I was randomly thinking about that. And the next day, an episode of Balanced Black Girl dropped. And that episode had a guest. The host, Les, had a guest on that day. And they were talking about a number of things. But then they got to a little segment where they were talking about astrology and like the signs of their businesses. And the nature of the business, not just thinking about like the ideal client for their businesses and like what that person looks like, but actually what the business looks like imagining the business as a person, what that person embodies and what they look like. It was the creator of the Inside Then Out journal. That's who was the guest on that day. And they started talking about the astrological signs of their businesses. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is confirmation. So I was like, oh, I think it'd be cool to run the astrological charts of my businesses and think about who they are as a person. Like, imagine them as a person, who they are. So for my consulting business, I don't have an exact time. I did an estimated time, but I do have the day that it was technically quote unquote born or created, because it was the day that I filed for my LLC and everything else. So based on the information that I do have and, technically the day that I filed my LLC and like established this as a business, and the estimated time and the location. My consulting business is a Taurus sun, a Gemini moon, and a Leo rising. So for her sun, she is hardworking, she is loyal, reliable, patient. She can be sensual, she's artistic, she is creative. On the other side, she is stubborn, she is bullheaded, she is set in her ways. She can be a little possessive, she could be a little lazy. And I'm just like, that is interesting. it's interesting because on the human design front, I am a projector, and projectors can sometimes be described as quote unquote lazy when that is far from the truth. We just have energy in pockets and in reserves, and we operate differently, and we are very much of the future. Like, we very much believe in not necessarily participating or working in the status quo. We know that there is more to being a human being than a human doing. Listen, if you know, you know. Projectors give serious work smarter, not harder energy. And a lot of times we are out of place in this world full of generators and manifesting generators, which I personally firmly believe is largely driven by capitalism. But that's a conversation for a different day. I think it's really interesting that my business, Sis, is a Taurus sun, and those are some of the other traits. Some other ones are Sis is down to earth, tenacious, graceful, diligent, a great listener, and regal. And I love that for my business. I love that for me. I also love for me that my business as a Gemini moon, she is charismatic, she is curious, she is communicative, she's quick witted, and she is a good mediator. I think those are all really cool qualities. Of course, Gemini sometimes get a bad rap for being quote unquote two-faced, or two-sided, which I think is a largely misunderstood aspect about them. I actually think that because they can see all sides, because they are an air sign, that they are exciting. They keep people on their toes. They are curious, and they love to learn, and they're good conversationalists. And I think when they are in an immature aspect of their sign, or like operating from an immature place, then of course, like any sign and any person, negative qualities can come out. But when I think they're operating from a higher perspective and a higher place and in full maturity, that they are a very wise and charismatic sign. And yeah, so I love that for the moon sign of my business. In terms of my business's rising sign, her rising sign is in Leo, and I'm not going to get into the houses and all of that right now. I'm just kind of focusing on the signs as they are and what they represent. But for a rising sign in Leo, my business, she is confident, she is popular, she is a leader, she has a strong work ethic, she's entertaining, and she is a public speaker. Um, and I love that for my business. My consulting work is largely focused on brand strategy, brand identity, communication strategy, for existing businesses or new businesses, and also authenticity in business. And I try my best to practice what I preach. So I love that, I don't know, based on the date and the time and the location of when I formed this business, that she embodies so many of those characteristics, all of which I do my best to uphold and aspire to if I'm not already there yet in terms of my work. But I think it's so cool that those are the placements for my business. So if you have never thought about it that way, if you are a business owner and into astrology and you haven't necessarily done an estimate or the astrology of your business, it might be something you might be interested or curious about. A fun little activity to do to imagine who she is, like personify the business. Think about it as a living, breathing thing. What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to sound like? What do you want it to feel like? What do you want it to represent? And you can, of course, think about all of those things on your own without the help of astrology. But if you're interested in using astrology as a tool, as a language to communicate who your business is, what your business represents, consider it. So let's do this podcast. So, as all of the OGs know, when the podcast first started, it was originally under a different name. It has since evolved to what it is today, what it is right now in this moment, which is focused on creative entrepreneurship. It's focused on self-improvement. It's focused on all of the things that we deal with in life, because at the end of the day, all of these things overlap, whether you're talking about your professional career, whether you're talking about owning or building a business or a brand, whether you're talking about your personal identity. You can always separate these things, but our lives are more intertwined and interconnected than I think we like to discuss. And sometimes personal shows up in business. Sometimes business shows up in personal. There's a lot of overlap. Everything is not black and white. There's a lot of things that just exist in the gray, even when it comes to our personal lives and work. So I want to take a little bit of a dive into astrological placements of my podcast. So let's do that. So for the podcast, it's a little bit different. I have the exact day that the first episode launched. I have the exact time that the first episode launched, because that is stored in the host platform that I first, scheduled it on. And I have the location. So, of course, the show has evolved. The name has changed. It is in a different phase today than when it first started, but still going strong and still doing the thing. So check her out. So the podcast was officially born on January 21st, 2022. That's when the first episode launched. Of course, there was some work that went into the show prior to that, but we'll just refer to that as like the gestation period, the time before. So she was born on January 21st, 2022 at 5 p.m. I have the location, and she is an Aquarius sun, like me. She is a Virgo moon, not like me. And she is a Leo rising. So the podcast, as well as my consulting business, are Leo rising. So I won't go over the qualities of Leo risings again, but it makes sense, right? Some of those were public speaking. Some of those were entertaining, so it makes sense for this podcast, I think. So some of the Aquarius sun qualities I will also resonate with personally, because I am actually an Aquarius sun. So one of the qualities is intellectual. We're highly creative, intellectual, and I can see that for this podcast. Like, something that I really love about this podcast is the ability to have deep and meaningful conversations, which is not just aligned with my astrological sign, it is also aligned with my human design as a projector. Independent. There's a huge thread of independence throughout the course of this podcast, in terms of getting it up and started and off the ground, in terms of showing up to record, but also simultaneously doing a lot of the work in the back end, from research to prepare, to preparation, to outreach, to guests, to scheduling, to editing, to promoting, all of these things. So there's a huge thread of that throughout the lifespan of the podcast. And it also aligns with me as a person, as an Aquarius sun. I consider myself as someone who is pretty independent. Not always great, because, that translates a lot of times to not wanting to be told what to do. Just I don't. I hate it. But, that's not always the best thing, especially depending on the environment and the situation. So we're working on that one. Another descriptor is that Aquarius sun is progressive. And I would like to think of this podcast as progressive, as touching topics and diving into creativity in a way that is meaningful and helpful and exploratory. Another, oh, this just gave me a slight ick. I've said this before in that a lot of people like to call Aquarius like detached and all of these things, but we are actually pretty freaking sensitive. And I think in many ways we have just mastered the art of detachment as a way to protect that sensitivity. But that being said, another descriptor is sensitive. This, AI summary that I'm reading says that our sensitive side often needs love, support, and appreciation, and I think that's true. I wouldn't say that like words of affirmation is a top love language for me, but when it does happen, it always feels really good, and sometimes I don't realize that I need it until I'm realizing that I'm starved for it. So by the time I get it, like I get really sensitive about it, as has happened in a past like episode before. Like I struggled with whether or not to like leave crying in for that episode as a response to just like deep affirmation and love and care from a friend. And yeah, I would think that that's kind of true. Sidebar: another way to show love, support, and appreciation to this podcast is to leave a review. So simultaneously, while you're listening to this, you can scroll on down to whatever platform you're listening to the show on and tap that 5 stars for me, please. Or if you're feeling extra generous, you can actually leave a written review. Let me know what about the show you've liked, loved, what you've learned, what you're taking with you. Even if you have something that you want to say that's more along the lines of constructive criticism, that's fine too. But don't like leave like a 1 star or something. Leave like a 5 star and then still say your constructive criticism thing. But yeah, so there's that. There's an aspect of Aquarius sun that is utopian, and I think that's true for me as an individual and as a person, but I also think that's true for this show. We sometimes live our lives in opposition to the current world or to the status quo or to the norm, and that could be for a multitude of reasons. For some people, it's just about being a rebel and going against the grain. But for others of us, it's because we see so many flaws in our current society and we just refuse to participate any more than we have to. And we take it upon ourselves to try to encourage others to strike back, rebel, and do the same. So I can see that. We sometimes live in our heads. We create our own worlds. I know daydreaming is a huge part of my existence and my life. Like visualization is very important to me. So I may spend a lot of time in my head doing that, dreaming up new worlds. But I also believe in making the intangible tangible. So I believe that the things that I dream up and I visualize, I can make manifest in the physical and in the real world. So I try to do my part to create the world that I want to see. So part of that requires dreaming. Nothing wrong with that. And Aquarius Sun is also known as being kind and generous. And I think that that can definitely be true as well. So I resonate with those qualities for myself as an individual, but I also resonate with those qualities for this podcast. And I think that's really cool. Some negative traits, we already talked about the emotional detachment thing. I'm not going to repeat that, but some negative traits, quote unquote negative, can be stubbornness. I can be stubborn. This can show up in the stubbornness and bullheadedness in Taurus for my consulting business. She is a Taurus sun. So yeah, I can be. I try to do better, but unfortunately it's kind of my default a lot of times, and unfortunately it gets reinforced when I'm right. But I'm not right all the time, obviously. I'm wrong a lot of the time, and I can eat my stubbornness in those moments. I can apologize if an apology is warranted or necessary. So yeah, another negative trait is anger and frustration. I think it's really interesting when I mention that like anger can be a tough thing, and I interact with other people or people who know me who are like, I can't even see that. I can't imagine that in you. You might not know me well enough, quite frankly, because it is a not so great characteristic or trait that I am working through. And another aspect of that is, again, being fully present and aware in my body, processing my emotions and working through them and feeling them instead of suppressing them, because that's a huge part of it too. You suppress something not great long enough, eventually it erupts. And I, that's not great. That's not a good thing. So working through that has been really important. Um, Particularly for an Aquarius sun, like when we feel like our freedom is threatened, we can be angry. And freedom can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I don't like to feel restricted or confined in any way. I liken it to being encroached on or like enclosed on or backed into a corner. Um, and I don't like that. I don't like that in my life. I don't like that in my work. I don't like that physically. Like if my physical space is invaded, I don't like that. So, yeah, something I'm working through. Yeah. Okay. What else? So I already mentioned that the podcast is a Leo rising, just like my consulting business. And I already talked about some of the qualities for Leo rising. I think I talked about the positive qualities. So maybe we'll talk about a couple of the negative. A couple that come up are the fear of like falling or like failing, and being hard on themselves, which I can see perfectionism come out a little bit with this podcast. Like, it's so frustrating to me when an episode doesn't go the way I want it to go, or maybe the sound quality isn't great no matter what I'm doing or what I'm trying to make it better, or maybe after the fact I might look back at a video and I'm like, oh my gosh, my freaking bra strap was hanging out the whole time and I didn't notice because I was so like engulfed in the conversation. Or maybe my headphones are like slightly falling off my head and I didn't push it back in that moment and it looks crazy in a clip, like whatever the case may be. So I can be overcritical, especially when it comes to this podcast, and clearly she is overcritical when it comes to herself as a Leo rising. So that may come in. Leo rising can be attention seeking. I think that shows up not so much in the quality or the content of the show, because I'm genuinely super interested and involved and like so excited to be in conversation with folks that I'm not like thinking about it in the moment. I'm just trying to give the best interview I can give and have the best conversation I can have. But I can definitely see that in terms of like looking at the downloads and like looking at the numbers. Like I'm trying my best not to do that as much anymore and to let that go. But it's like, you know, sometimes there'll be a really good week and a lot more listens than I'm used to, and I'll be really excited about that. And then, you know, maybe a few episodes later, like that number is changing, like the predicted downloads for whatever upcoming episode has shifted a little bit or changed, or sometimes the numbers aren't always consistent when you like log in on the back end of the different platforms. Like the numbers are varying, and I'm just like, okay, if more people are following the show and like if I'm getting more downloads this week, what's going on here? So just trying not to be like attention seeking in that way, I think is important, not just for me as a person, but also for Sister Girl, the podcast. As a project, like, is really important. So thinking about that too. So this podcast is a Virgo moon. So as a Virgo moon, the podcast is grounded in practicality, has a strong desire for balance and harmony through service, meticulous, analytical, thoughtful, attention to detail, highly organized, efficient, but can sometimes lead to worry or over analysis. And yes, she is. Yes, she is. As an entity, as someone stewarding the entity, yes, she is. And yeah, I think that's just really cool. I spent way more time in this than I intended to. I really just wanted to suggest that, folks look into the astrology of their business and think about who or how or what or if the business or the entity would present as any particular thing, and to try to imagine that business or that project as a real person with particular qualities that you already feel aligned with or that you want to embody because you feel like that is a good representation of the type of business you want to have. So that's just a fun way to do that. I also want to quickly share a small segment from an upcoming conversation with another guest, Fabi Cordaro, because we got a little bit into human design and I mentioned human design, so I thought it would be fun to include that segment from our conversation in this episode. So I'm going to play that now. Yeah.
One tool that I absolutely love for decision making is human design. And I know you mentioned it, and I know
Yeah.
you have experience
Yeah.
with human design. And it is, when I found this technology, it like blew my mind. And like I read my human design the first time, and I literally threw my phone across the room because I was like, this is too accurate.
Yeah.
Like, and so if you don't know what human design is, it is a technology that was channeled and downloaded by Ra Uru Hu in the 80s. And it is basically a combination of the Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, the I Ching, which is basically the oldest book in written history. It's a oldest Chinese book in history. Astrology. We all love our astrology girlies.
Yeah.
And there's one more.
I always go with the Kabbalah, the I Ching, and astrology. I mean, there's an aspect of it too that has a lot to do with
The
your
chakra
chakras
system.
too. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
that's the one. Yeah, the chakra system. And so it kind of combines all of those different things. And the cool thing to me is that it doesn't, like, you can't mess it up. You literally just need your date, time, and place of birth to look it up. And you could just go to like myhumandesign.com or something and look up your chart. And it gives you a
yeah.
body graph, which basically is what they call the blueprints of your soul. And the cool thing about this is, as someone who loves energy healing and anything all about the energy, is it it isn't a personality kind of, not only a personality kind of test. It is a way for you to learn how you use your energy, what your design is, how to make decision based on your design. And so when you asked about like, how do you listen to your intuition, how do you hear your body, I ask my clients, what is your human design? Because that's what you should follow. You should follow your profile, your design, and your signature, right? So
Yeah.
if you haven't heard of human design, you're listening or watching, delve so deep into that because it's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
But it really helps you to be able to not outsource your decision making and really understand how you're designed to make decisions. And it's
Yeah.
the best thing ever.
Yeah. That was going to be one of my questions for you. Like, what are some, like, what are some of your favorite tools? Because you've mentioned so many things, and some of them I don't want to call tools because I feel like they're just practical ways of being more in tune with yourself. Like, when you're hungry, eat. When you know you need to get some sunshine and go for that walk, go for that walk. But it's also regulating your nervous system, learning to trust yourself again, wherever trust was, damaged in the past
Yes.
with your relationship with self or with other, just repairing that relationship of trust, but
Mhm.
also what external tools. I've, talked on the show previously about human design because I love it. What is
It
your human
is.
design? I'm very curious.
I'm a manifesting generator.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
hence the 50,000 things I do.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm a 6-3 sacral manifesting generator. And all of those words may
Yeah.
make no sense to you if you've never heard of human design, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What's your human
I'm
design?
so that, and I have another question for you. So mine, my human design is a projector, and I've talked about the different like types on the show before, and just given basic definitions about what the different things mean, like the type, the authority, like all of those things. But I am a projector. I'm a 2-4 profile, and
Okay.
my authority is splenic.
Okay.
Um, and those are like the main areas of mine that I like even understand. Like some of the other stuff, like the crossroad, like the all that. I don't know. Don't ask me anything about
Incarnation.
that. Incarnation cross. I'm just like, don't ask me anything about that. But I know, I know those first three, and I read a lot of them. I love to follow the little pages on Instagram. I've
Yes.
gotten like an actual like professional explanation and reading about mine in particular. So I'm heavy in my era of leaning into my energetic type and what that means for me, and also just reflecting on past experiences too, and
Yeah.
how maybe when I didn't know anything about human design, how some aspects of my type or my profile was showing up and I didn't
Yeah.
even know it.
Yeah.
So I just think it's really interesting, and I encourage everyone to check it out. Like I did a whole episode of about personality tests and types and like all these
Yes.
different things, just as like a broad categorization of these things, but I think they're so worth exploring just to learn more about yourself and other people in the world, how you relate to each other. So I always think it's really cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
I would recommend Karen Curry Parker. She updated the language from Ra's original kind of download or creation of the technology.
Yeah.
Um, it's called Quantum Human Design, and it honestly is
Mm.
more kind of relatable and more based in the feminine versus the masculine because Ra was a guy and his
Yeah.
it was very masculine. So Quantum Human Design is great. She has a book. It's like a blue book. It's called the Quantum Human Design Workbook. It is
Okay.
amazing. Highly recommend it because
Yeah.
it can become a lot. Like once, like I feel like once I read that, it kind of settled and I was able to like understand more because there's so much. You have the planets, you have the gates, you have um the channels, you have the centers, like all of these different
Yeah.
things. They build on top of each other. Another thing that I'm obsessed with is the gene keys, which is basically like your incarnation cross is correlates to your gene keys. Um,
Okay.
and the gene keys is like a whole other world
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
delve into.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want a really good reference or resource, I would recommend Karen Curry Parker. I love her stuff.
Okay. Karen Curry Parker. Okay, I'll have to look into that for sure. And I I feel like this is a sign that I need to look into gene keys because I keep hearing about it. I've never looked into it before. Surprisingly,
Yeah.
because I love looking into everything. I just haven't
Yeah.
gotten into that one because I'm still trying to digest everything else.
Yeah.
So
Build
I
stuff.
love that. Yeah. I think those are some really cool tools just to learn yourself more and to just be more centered and more grounded and tap into intuition and decision making and things that can help to support you in whatever you want to create,
Exactly.
leaning into your energy and how you show up
Yes.
in the world, and understanding that and how to use it to your advantage is really important.
It's a superpower. Honestly, if
Yeah.
you know how to tap into and use your energy in the most like aligned way, it is a superpower that I think everything is. Not I think I know everything is energy, but I think the next frontier is to see that everything, like not to have like a to-do list or thinking of things as in a linear fashion in terms of time because time doesn't exist. So thinking about energy as your currency, right? Like you giving your energy to something, how do you harness your energy? For you as a projector, you don't have a defined cycle, right? So you don't have a defined energy center. So it means that you need to be more not conservative, but more aware, and know that you need breaks. That's how
Yeah.
you recharge, right? Or you need
Yep.
to plug into a generator or
Yeah.
into a benefiting generator, and
Yeah.
that helps you to not beat yourself up because you need to go take a nap, or you need to,
Yeah.
you're not as go 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 as someone next to you, because
Yeah.
we live in a world that expects us all to be manifestors, and literally 2% of
Yeah.
the world's manifestors, like actual
Yeah.
manifestors, right?
Yeah.
And the rest of us have to wait. You have to wait for an invitation. I
Yeah.
have to wait to respond. And the
Yeah.
waiting part is so hard in a world that
Yeah.
expects you just to go, 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 like
Yeah.
make a decision and then go for it. And it's like hustle culture and it's goal boss.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
is, let's just calm down.
Yeah.
And everyone's not the same. We all
Yeah.
don't have the same energy. Some of us need to, all of us need to be conservative for our energy, because I, as a manifesting generator, don't just have energy for energy's sake. I only have
Yeah.
unlimited energy for the things that light me up. So I can
Yes.
talk to
Yeah.
you all day because this lights me up. I
Yeah.
cannot do something else that I'm absolutely a bore all day because I won't
Yeah.
have the energy for it. So
Yeah.
that's why it's like a superpower. If you can figure out your own energy, how to use it and harness it, you can do literally anything. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yes. I love that. You're speaking to my soul right now and it's so true. Like just it just goes back to being in tune with yourself and how you move through life and how you leverage the energy source you have and how you show up. So I think that's so cool.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing that. So that was just a small taste of an upcoming conversation with Fabi. Again, this is a little bit of an extra episode, not really planned per se, but I thought it'd be fun to include following the astrology episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you feel encouraged to connect with Tracey and perhaps get a reading for yourself about your birth chart, your attraction factor, your astrological forecast, any of the offerings that she has on her website. I will make sure to link her website again in the show notes in case you're curious or in case you're interested. And thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And I will catch you on the next one. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. All right. Bye, friend. Talk to you soon. Hey, friend. If you made it this far, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. The Prolific Hub podcast is hosted and produced by me, Aaliyah Cheyenne. If this episode resonated with you, please leave a 5-star rating and positive written review. Reviews help tremendously in the podcasting world, so I appreciate you taking the time to leave one. Be sure to share this episode with a friend and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the Prolific Hub pod on your favorite social media platforms to stay connected. Consider supporting the show with a monthly subscription or send us your thoughts on this episode via text or voice note. Find all of the juicy details in the show notes below. Catch you on the next episode.